I have a theory, and you might even call it a bit of a game theory, if not a film theory, like MacPat would say, that we've been seeing a lot of really good video game adaptations because they actually improve on those video games themselves.
What did you say? What the fuck did you just say?
No! God, please, no! No!
Welcome back to Torn Apart. I'm really glad that you enjoyed my Dune video last week, and this week we're doing something almost as controversial because we're talking about incredibly well written, well directed video game adaptations, and specifically the ones that have come out in the last few years. Even more specifically, we're talking about TV shows, we're not talking about films. Mostly because the approach for adapting video games in the film format has been done through comedic realms. If you think about Sonic movies, if you think about the Super Mario Bros. Movies, or even if you think about the most recent movie called Free Guy, which is 100% a Fortnite adaptation without being a Fortnite adaptation. Well, those don't take themselves very seriously, right? This is not the case with our TV shows, so today we're gonna be looking at 4 TV shows that you probably love, and if you've not seen them, I'm gonna make sure that you know a little bit about them. I'm gonna give you some synopsises. I'm talking about Fallout, which came out just a couple of weeks ago. I'm talking about The Last of Us. I'm talking about Arcane, and I'm talking about Cyberpunk Edgerunners.
Everyone wants to save the world, they disagree on how.
Let's jump in and talk about Fallout because I really love this series. I try to spice things up a little bit by watching 1 episode per night, but I also broke my own rules because I ended up watching the 2 final episodes in 1 night because I simply could not stand not knowing what was going to happen. I feel like a good thing to do with the Fallout series, especially for the 2nd season, would be to release it on a weekly basis, because this is a series that really needed to be released that way, so that people would start talking about it on Twitter, so that people might start discussing references to the games and trying to speculate exactly which parts of what game they were trying to adapt. Having said that, what is Fallout about? More than 200 years after a nuclear holocaust, a young woman named Lucy leaves behind her home in Vault 33 to venture out into the dangerous, unforgiving wasteland of devastated Los Angeles to look for her father, who has been kidnapped. Along the way, she meets a brotherhood of steel squire and a ghoul bounty hunter, each with their own mysterious pasts and agendas to settle. One thing we can say about all of the adaptations that I mentioned is that they all have excellent casting. Sometimes they try to cast people who actually look like the people that we know in the games, or they look like the voice actors themselves. Sometimes they do the absolute opposite and it works out as well. They also have incredible special effects. Well, the thing is, you actually have to believe in these worlds, because when you think about video games, very often they are adapting stories which are kind of weird. Think about Death Stranding, for example. That is such a weird story. I could never imagine it in a film mode. And it would require so much money at the end of the day. This is what video games are about. They make us dream in completely different ways that books do, or that movies and TV shows do as well. So believing into these stories also means trying to contextualize them into our own history. So you end up basically recontextualizing a video game so that it fits with things that happens within our own society. And the thing that I really love about this Fallout adaptation, for example, would be that, unfortunately for us, we're living through uncertain times right now. If you look at everything that is happening between Palestine and Israel, if you look at stuff that is happening in between Israel and Iran and other countries basically all around it, if you look at what's happening between Russia and Ukraine, if you look at the political instability of a lot of other South American countries, I mean, a nuclear holocaust doesn't seem too far-fetched at this point.
Everyone will please panic.
And I didn't even mention the China versus Taiwan thing that has been happening for a couple of years as well. We are worried about the future, and this TV show definitely is not helping things out. Mostly because it is a huge deconstruction of corporate America and of capitalism as well, and the way in which capitalism will capitalize so much that they will try to make everything worth something. And the good thing about Fallout is that they basically invest into the apocalypse by creating these vaults all around America. And the thing is, if the apocalypse doesn't happen, then all of the money that all of these people invested in creating this nuclear holocaust vaults is gonna go down the drain. So you can already imagine what's going to happen, right? Especially when you have a lot of money and a lot of resources to make bad things happen, so you can make a lot of money. A lot of these themes are resonating with things that are actually happening right now. Look at, for example, with Elon Musk and the fact that he bought Twitter just because he could, not necessarily because he liked Twitter, not necessarily because he thought he might make it better, just because he could, and he's a really petty human being. These are the type of things we're dealing with on a daily basis, and I think that's what makes Fallout even stronger than the video games themselves, if you look thematically speaking. I've played Fallout 4 and I didn't enjoy it that much, mostly because you can't really engage with the main characters, because the main character is a blank canvas where you can project anything that you'd like. You end up saying yes to almost any kind of community that you want to join while you're playing the games, because that just gives you access to more missions, to more plot twists, and to more exciting things that could happen. So you never actually create a character at the end of the day, especially within the Fallout parameters, but you're kind of saying yes to everything to the point that there is no identity. Fallout doesn't really have a strong identity, in my opinion, especially when it comes to its characters, and that's something that the TV show does incredibly well, mostly because we have access to 3 different characters, and with these 3 characters here we get to understand exactly each faction in a different way, and when they collide they have actual drama that is interesting to watch, which is something that is not really true within the games. It just seems a bit chaotic. I feel like the Fallout games are fun 100%. I'm not saying that playing them is not fun, but I am saying that when it comes to its story, when it comes to the way that it's written, when it comes to you engaging with the plot itself, it just fails completely, in my opinion. But that was kind of true for Skyrim as well. I mean, Skyrim is not good and memorable mostly because of its story. It is good because of the side missions, it's good because of what you can become after hours and hours of gameplay and constructions and stuff like that. One thing that we can also say about this series and how it improves on the video game is just it looks better. Like, I've not played the Fallout games on the computer, I will admit to that. I've played only on console, so of course I'm very biased when it comes to this, but the Fallout games don't really look that good. They glitch all the time. There are so many incredible bugs that break the game, and they break the immersion as well.
I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this big robot suit, like, you realize that that's doing nothing for me.
And the TV show is completely the opposite. Like, I honestly fell in love with the universe of Fallout way more thanks to the TV show, in contrast with playing the games, because I feel like the games have a lot of interesting things going on, but as I said before, since you don't really emotionally engage with any of them, it's just flashy things happening on screen which entertain you for sure, but you don't really love them. And I loved everything about this series just because it was relating to a set of really strong characters and really good performances at the end of the day. There are a lot of things that you kind of figure out by yourself while playing the Fallout games, and it kind of reminds me of games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, where basically if you go deep enough, if you start basically opening up all the different cupboards, all of the different wardrobes, and reading all of the extra content that you can find in the game, you can learn a lot more and actually engage with the universe. But I have a lot of problems where the game is not forcing you to do any of that, so it means that if you're not engaging with the main story, if the game kind of like becomes kind of lightweight where you don't feel forced to do anything, you're just wandering around and doing a bit of everything at the same time, well, you don't take it seriously as well. So it means that there is a lot of stuff that immediately you're gonna avoid, immediately you're gonna forget about it, because the game is not really taking itself seriously, to the point that even if it throws a lot of lore at you, you're not gonna care about it, and that really sucks. And that's why I think that the TV show is actually better than the Fallout games. I'm actually quite happy that a lot of people are discovering these games thanks to the TV show. I definitely think they're worth playing, but I don't think they've aged as well as many other games in the same genre.
You trust me?
Now let's jump into the next show and let's go in chronological order and talk about The Last of Us. What is The Last of Us about? The series is set 20 years into a pandemic caused by a moss fungal infection which causes its host to transform into zombie-like creatures, and it collapses society. It follows Joel, who is a smuggler tasked with escorting a teenager called Ellie across the post-apocalyptic United States. It came out in 2023 and a lot of critical praise, a lot of fan praise as well. It got a lot of fans angry for the stupidest reasons as well, and this time around I have to nuance my own theory as well, because I have to admit that the Last of Us games are incredible. I actually have the tattoo that Ellie has as well in the second game right here on my arm, because I love those games a lot, mostly because of the main story, how engaging it is, and how the characters, even the side characters who end up dying in horrific ways, you care about them. The game makes you care about them, and the gameplay itself makes you care about everything. It's a package. It comes perfectly tied up as a Christmas present at the end of the day. So I'm not trying to say the TV show worked because it was actually better than the game, but I will say that it perfectly understood what the game was trying to do, and just because of how media works, just because of how storytelling works, it did those things even better. So one thing that Craig Mazin really understands about the game, it's the fact that it's all about the side stories, it's all about the side characters, not necessarily just about the main plot. And here I have to remind you of two episodes, specifically the one where basically they're hiding in the town and being hunted by this one woman who is actually one of the main characters in Yellow Jackets. I can't remember her name right now. Incredible performance, and the writing really did her justice as well. And I'm gonna draw your attention, of course, to the kind of controversial episode about the two friends who become lovers and who basically retired in the middle of nowhere and created a perfect life for themselves. They're friends of Joel, of course, and it's a very tragic love story at the end of the day. Those are the highlights of this season, in my opinion. It really understands what it means to play The Last of Us and why we're doing all of this at the end of the day. Because if we're playing a post-apocalyptic game, we're not necessarily playing it because we want things to get worse and worse and worse. There is hope at the end of the tunnel, and these kind of scenes where basically they try to develop side characters that we might have seen in the games, but we actually care even more about them. It's the things that makes us care even more. Of course, this is a TV show that actually recaptured certain things almost as much as the video game. If you think about the first episode, it's literally a copy and paste version of what happens in the game. And I actually have some criticism to add when it comes to this, because I noticed that the game itself is approximately in between 15 to 25 hours of gameplay, and they actually chose to make 9 episodes. It was supposed to be 10, but they basically put 1 and 2 together so it would become 9 episodes of runtime for the story of the first season of The Last of Us. That was a huge mistake in my opinion. There are a lot of sequences that end up feeling, well, less emotionally impactful than in the game itself. The hospital scene, for example, which is one of the most important parts in Last of Us, it kind of represents everything that we've been going through when it comes to Joel's journey, Ellie's journey, and of course the main plot itself of the game about the infection and trying to make the world better at the end of the day. It just doesn't work for me because it came out of nowhere, because it didn't really have enough time to develop the Joel and Ellie relationship, time that we actually spent in the game itself. When you think about it, if you shorten a story from 15 to 25 hours, let's say 20 hours by half, because we got 9 hours of storytelling at the end of the day, I feel like it's not enough. Like honestly, you can't really tell this story with this little time, and I'm kind of worried for the second season as well, because the second season has a lot of time jumps and it changes POVs quite often as well. And if you don't take the time to develop these characters, if you're rushing through the storyline, then it's not gonna work at all. People are not gonna care about it. And that's one thing that I didn't notice about Fallout. Fallout didn't feel like it was rushing through the post-apocalyptic landscapes. It actually took its time to kind of unravel the mystery itself. While The Last of Us, it kind of feels like it needed more time. It's still an excellent adaptation, but it's kind of playing a little bit with the theory that I'm going with. I think one thing that it does really well though, it's when it tries to contextualize the pandemic worldwide, because one thing we can criticize about The Last of Us is that it's very America-centric, while this show here is clearly resonating with all of the things that we went through with the pandemic in 2020 and 2021. So I'm sitting here being like, this feels like something that everyone should care about, and it feels like it's happening all around the world, which is something that we didn't really feel with The Last of Us, because we felt really engaged with the Americana, we felt really engaged with that kind of universe in the same way that we feel engaged with the Walking Dead universe when it's setting its story in the US, and as soon as they go away from the US, it feels like a completely different show, right? But that's mostly because of how they introduced the apocalypse itself. So this definitely improves on the video game without a doubt. Now let's go back in time a little bit more and talk about Cyberpunk Edgerunners. There are a lot of people who loved this series so much, and I really understand why. I actually got on the very end of the hype, mostly because I think I was catching up other things back then. It was in 2022, it came out on Netflix. In case you haven't seen it, I'm gonna give you a little bit of synopsis. We've moved to animation, by the way, this is not live action anymore. Cyberpunk Edgerunners is set in a night city, a self-reliant metropolis located in the free state of California that suffers from extensive corruption, cybernetic addiction, and gang violence. The anime story is primarily set in Santo Domingo, the oldest and poorest and most industrial district of Night City. If there is one thing we can say, that it's beautifully animated, it's visually stunning, and it's also very consistent. Once again, the same argument that we used for Fallout as well. It has a lot of bugs. It's a video game that looks beautiful, that looks stunning, and then you get one of the most disgusting bugs ever, and you're not immersed anymore, you don't believe in that anymore. So I know it's a bit of a cheat, but the TV show is definitely improving in a lot of that. It has some visual and thematic consistency that works so well, and I also feel that one important thing that it really got when it was trying to adapt this story, it's the idea that if you're being corrupted by a virus, you should see the corruption itself on the body and in the mind of the main character, which is what happens to David Martinez, and it's something that definitely does not happen as it is supposed to happen for V in the video game Cyberpunk. It's a bit weird, because when you think about it, the stakes of the entire game are about the fact that V is getting corrupted by this virus, and there are two conflicting personalities, basically the one that is played by Keanu Reeves and the one that is played by us, which are fighting against each other for being the only survivor within the body. And it's something that doesn't work in the long run as well, because it's an open world game, so you are incited to go around and do a lot of different side missions. Basically everything in this universe is built for you to go around and do stuff besides the main plot itself, and this doesn't work out. I feel like there would be a better way to do this, and you could also use the glitches themselves by the fact that the game should almost become impossible to play just because of all the different glitches and how V is reacting to this virus that is slowly consuming her. But it's something that is kind of weird to do when you think about it if you're doing a AAA action game, because you want people to play it for as long as possible so that they can talk about it with their friends and other people can play it as well. It would actually be interesting if there were certain missions which you couldn't do after, let's say, once again 30 hours of gameplay because you were too corrupted. So you would basically fail the mission after you'd started doing it because you just took too much time to actually go and do it. This is something that the TV show does really well. You start really relating to this teenager at the end of the day who wants to become something important, who wants to be there for his family and his friends, but he's slowly becoming basically a cyber psycho. He's becoming a bit insane. And also think that the TV show is almost automatically better than the video game just because of all the controversies around the video game itself. And I also think that the story, since it's not as derivative as the game, since it's an open world game, you end up just relating with the universe and caring about it so much more. And now let's head into our last example, and let's go back to 2021 with the animated series Arcane, which is once again to be found on Netflix. They're really good when it comes to adapting these video games, right? Because even Castlevania, the animated series, was a really good example of a good adaptation. But let's not mix things up. We're talking about Arcane. What is Arcane about? Do you know League of Legends? Do you know that I've been playing League of Legends for more than 8 years now? And yes, to answer your question, my mental health is shit just because of that game. Amidst the escalating unrest between the rich, utopian city of Piltover and the city-oppressed underbelly of Zone, sisters Vi and Jinx find themselves embroiled in a developing conflict over clashing convictions and arcane technologies. So I'm a League player, right? So I'm probably the best person to actually analyze this TV show and tell you exactly why it works. I played so many hours on this game. Honestly, if I told you how many hours I spent playing this game, you would probably be like, how are you not insane right now? How are you not literally just dying on the floor? Well, this is mostly to do with the fact that there is a huge amount of lore in the League of Legends game that, let's say, even 80% of people don't give a shit about. Every single character is related to the universe or is related to another character. There are like certain different types of families or different types of alien races as well, but I have no idea why. I have no idea what is going on between all of them, and that is because the game doesn't actually work with the lore itself. As in, the lore is kind of like stuff that you can read about if you go on the League of Legends website. Even if you look at just all the cinematics that they release on YouTube, if you look at stuff that is being released with the World Championships as well, I've looked through all of that and still I don't really get the main story of League of Legends, and I don't really understand why we should care about it, because it doesn't really impact anything when it comes to the gameplay itself. Because the gameplay is basically a 5 against 5 match where you're working with each other and also against each other. There are certain characters, certain champions that work better with each other, but there is nothing forcing you to actually play them at the end of the day, because there are so many different characters and so many different ways of playing the game as well. But at the end of the day, you have to remember that you're playing versus other human beings. You're not actually playing versus those characters that you love so much and that you see represented in Arcane. That is the main issue with the video game. If you look at the chat as well, League of Legends is known for being very toxic, and the people themselves are supposed to be very toxic, the players. The way they interact with each other, it's not necessarily that the characters themselves are toxic or they have toxic personalities.
I'd rather live in the late 1340s, you know, catch the bubonic plague and then cough my lungs out of my dick instead of having to sit in a room with a League of Legends player.
Do you see the nuance? Do you see the problem with a game like this, where basically you set up lore just as sprinkles at the top of a cake and nothing else? The lore, you never actually engage with it, and nobody talks about League of Legends lore online. They talk mostly about strategies, they talk mostly about different updates that come out every single week. They talk about mid-season updates as well, which are gonna slightly change the way that you play the game and the way that you go for certain objectives. They don't talk about the champions and how they change the game, because they actually don't. And that's why at the end of the day, Arcane is without a doubt probably one of the best adaptations of a video game ever, that actively improves on it, that makes you care about these characters as if they were actual characters and not just avatars for gamers. Imagine, for example, in most most games, you're fighting against AI as well. You're not only fighting versus other players. So maybe that might be one way of kind of like trying to include the lore and the story and the personalities of all of these champions and characters within the game. Sometimes you hear hints of it. For example, if there are certain characters that are fighting against each other, so on opposing themes, they will have a very specific set of dialogue lines. They will basically be shouting at each other while you're playing, or if they get killed, for example, by one or the other. But that is kind of like the fun of playing League of Legends, more than you actually feel like the character is being represented on screen. Once again, it's a fun addition and not necessarily one of the main assets of the game.
Oh, good boy! Good boy! Who's a good boy? Yes, who's a good boy? Oh.
But that was basically it. This is the video that I wanted to make for this week because I thought that I wanted to say something about video game adaptations just in general, and I didn't want to talk about the curse of video game adaptations because I feel like we're definitely out of it and it's a bit of a clickbait title at this point, so I wanted to do something different, so that's why we're here. What do you think about it? Have you played any of these games? What do you think about the TV adaptations? Do you think it's better to do a film? Do you think it's better to do a TV series? Which format works the best? In my opinion, it's the series, of course, because you get more time. Sometimes you get a little bit less budget, but it really depends on who you're working with as a distributor at the end of the day. If you like this video, as usual, here at the bottom, I'm gonna be putting other videos that you might enjoy, which talk about the same topics as of today. I think I've talked about other video game adaptations in the past, so check them out. And here at the top, I'm gonna be putting the topic of the next video that I'm working for. It's gonna be a quite exciting video and it's probably gonna be really long. Having said that, don't forget to smash that like button. Every single time that you do that, you make sure that there is not any nuclear holocaust in the horizon for any of us.
Can I count on you?
And if you've seen the series, you know what I'm doing right now. Otherwise, you probably think I'm kind of weird, which is true. I am kind of weird. I'm Patrick, and this is Torn Apart.
Back in the 90s, I was in a very famous TV show.
So League of Legends, it's a bad game. Don't play it. I obviously would never play it, you know, because again, very bad game.